Quickly, we look at the challenges to nationalism, national identity, the issue of illegal immigrants, and what it is doing to nations. Not just in Bharat, but across Europe as well. We are in conversation with a very, very special panel to get this global perspective here on the Patriot Special on the Right Stand. Stay with us. Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome. A short while ago, we had thinkers, members from the United States who were talking about the road ahead for the world in geopolitics. And this time around, we have a network of patriots viewers, and they are largely from Europe. And of course, there is a representation from Asia and Bharat within this table. But the conversation is going to be, what is Europe going through? How is it somewhere linked to what Bharat faces, or we as a country face? And is it so bad to be called a patriot? But let's introduce all of us. To my right is Philip de Winter, an MP from Belgium. Philip, thank you very much. And then your counterpart, another MP on the far corner there, and that is Uncle Van der Misch. Have I got it right?
Yes, it's exactly like that.
Thank you, Senator and MP Belgium. And I've got Enzo Alias. He is President of the Patriots Network France, Enzo. And Kenneth Morris. He is the English Coordinator, Patriots Network and political consultant.
Thanks very much.
And the Bharat part of it, represented by Charu Pragya, National Spokesperson of the BJP, but also Coordinator India for the Patriots Network. They call themselves the Patriots Network. So it's a Patriots conversation. So let's start with Philip, your thoughts. What's Europe going through right now? What's Belgium going through right now? Is there a churn, culturally, socially?
Europe, of course, and we're facing the same problems as the rest of Europe. And one of the big problems in Europe at the moment is mass immigration. Immigration from third world countries, mostly from Africa, northern Africa. Certainly after all the geopolitical problems that occur in Africa, and certainly North Africa, Gaza, the Palestinian cause, the war Israel against Hamas and Hezbollah, the war in Syria, what happened in Libya, and so on and so on. A lot of so-called political refugees came to Europe. But not all of them are real political refugees, and some of them are very dangerous for Europe, are terrorists, and they try to infiltrate Europe. So we had our share of terrorist attacks also. We had our 26/11 also in Belgium. We had a terrorist attacks a few years ago on our airport. More than 120 people were killed. It was a terrorist attack who was planned and organized by ISIS. Well, I'm into diversity, no problem. But when a minority becomes a majority, and that's what's happening with mass immigration from North African Islamic countries, then, the majority doesn't only take over your country, but also takes over your culture, your values. India is facing also the security problem. It's a global problem of terrorism, the problem of immigration in certain provinces in India, and so on and so on. So we have a lot in common, and the struggle is the same. The struggle to maintain and keep our culture the way it is.
But let me ask you, Uncle, do you agree with Philip, or do you have a different perspective?
I do agree with him. We are from the same political party in Europe. And the fact that I went into politics in Europe, in my country, is because we are facing problems, and the well-being of a society you can measure by the well-being of women and children, and that is not going well in my country, and that is why I introduced myself into politics. I used to be a former Miss Belgium, so I was famous already, and easy access to the people to explain the points of our party and how we want to change the world, and starting with our own society, our own country first. We are a nation with people which is dying actually, because we do not have enough children. Every woman should have like 2 children or 2 or 3 children. Some do not have the luck to have any children. That might also be possible, but you need to replace yourself by children, otherwise your people, they die. And that's a big problem, not only in my country but in the Western Europe. And the European Union which is the leftist European Union. It's kind of dictatorship because we don't have really the election of the commissioners, of people who have the power in the European Parliament, or the Commission. They try to solve the solution by immigrating people, by opening up our borders of Europe and letting people in. We have many people, immigrations from North Africa, from Africa itself, and now they opened up the borders also for people fleeing from Gaza. Like more than 50% of the people who fled Gaza because of the war, which I can understand, they are taken in by our country. They live in Brussels, but we don't know exactly who they are. We don't know what their intentions are. There's not a good control, and there's not any security on who is entering our civilization. So our party, what we want in Europe is to close the borders, see who is already in, make sure that we are safe in Europe, and then help people, because we as Europeans and the European Union, we help a lot of people all over the world. We send money for them to have a good life. We had a monocultural society. We had a little diversity by people who came in from Italy, from Spain, from Western Europe. And then it changed with the migration of the people from North Africa. The Islam integrated into our country, which we had never seen before. We didn't know what it was, and we saw also crimes being immigrated into our country, like honorary killings, the way women are treated like second hand or second in the society, second class in society, which was very, very strange. I want a normal secular life, just like it used to be in the 80s, 90s in my country. So there's a lot of change at this moment.
So is it a clash of faith? Is it because Christianity and Islam, two different ways of life, or is it a cultural part, Enzo? How do you see this evolving in France? France has also borne the brunt of it. So,
well, in France we have 60% of the mosque who was fundraised by the Miligorus from Turkey, by Erdogan, and I think they have a mindset of conquest. They want to conquest Europe, and also Erdogan says that. He told our mosque are military based, and we will conquest Europe not by guns but by demography. So it's a real plan. It's not coming from somewhere. And also the rest are from the Muslim Brotherhood. So they know exactly what they want. They know exactly what they want to do in the future. And we can see the young generation from Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, they hate France. They are French people, but they hate France. For example, for the hymne national, our national song, they doesn't want to sing it. Because they have a shame to be French, but when they turn back in their own country, they are not Algerian at all, because they are middle of somewhere, but they don't have a real identity. They don't know where they are. They just identify like a Muslim, but not like a French citizens. And it's a real problem, because for my part, I live in Marseille, in the south of France. Is 1 million citizen cities, and we have almost 40% of the population are Muslims. And is making real troubles, because we have, for example, is normally like schools, but the pork is forbidden now. Because we have a majority of young children who are Muslims, and they are making troubles because they know they have enough population to say, no, we want that, we want that. And the majority of mayors now, they are listening this population because they are voting like a one guy.
Yeah, one block.
One block.
Yeah. So then that vote becomes a big number, and then it becomes a pressure on the councillors.
Exactly. And also the Imam said you have to vote for these candidates when they go to the mosque. So it's a religion's vote. It's not like a real democracy. You said, oh, I want to vote for this candidate for his program. No, now it's not anymore like this.
And that's the problem if you bring in Islam, and certainly radical Islam, then when they become a majority, they take over. It becomes a hostile takeover of your society. And that's what we are very afraid of.
The minorities, they said, oh, we are a victim because the laicity is against Islam. So we have to protect ourselves, we have to make our own community, we have to work only together because the French people are racist, are anti-Islam, etc. So they use that. And after, when they're growing up, they are pushing back, as we can see, for example, in US. In US, the LGBT community wants to protect the Muslim majority, and when they become the majority, 51% in the city council, they push back all LGBTs. And the LGBT communities are crying and say, I don't understand, we are helping them, and now they are pushing us back.
The Englishman has to come in with a little bit of a unique angle. We think ourselves a bit different in Britain. And the thing is, we are very, very different. At least I can speak for Britain. We see the situation as more of a suicide than a conquest.
Okay.
So I still think it's a path to suicide that can be avoided. There's still time. We're still optimistic. That's the premise to what I'm about to say. The situation is, when one thinks about the language of conquest, the perception can be that the state does not have the power to rectify a particular issue. Absolutely not the case. The British state has excellent intelligence services, military, and whatever else. If there's some terror threat, of course, all countries in Europe have radical groups and so on, which are terror threats. It's really up to us to deal with things rather than to say we've lost, which we haven't lost. That's the first thing. What I would say is that in terms of that perception and that movement towards a collapse of national morale, we are particularly affected for certain reasons. First one is we are an island, a group of islands, and it is an almost inconceivable thing to many Brits what's happening right now with the illegal migration in the English Channel, which you may have heard about.
Yes.
You know, our whole history was built upon the fact that we had this navy and we were protected by the water and so on. And this idea in the national conscience, you must think of people that haven't been conquered by foreign power for 1,000 years.
For a while, the fight was that the French were sending them over.
Yeah. So I think maybe they are, but of course the situation. we don't get on maybe as well as you might think. But there you are. But the thing there is, in terms of the national perception, one has to think of these things, because when it comes to international relations, if I have an ally, I want to know he's capable. If I say there might be a war and we're going to stand together and fight, but it turns out your military is useless, well, I don't have an ally. I've got to use this guy, a liability, absolutely. And so the other question will be, okay, what do I get? What's my benefit from working with Britain? What is their national morale? What is their society like? I mean, if they have a war, are people going to leave Britain, go to the theatre, which is going to be the other side of whichever continent you pick? That's just the fact of it. Are people going to join a huge military conflict and go to the other side of the world while their country's currently being invaded at the same time? It's a very weird perception. You have to ask people on the street. It was because we had this sort of weird veil where we said certain communities cannot be criticised on anything, as if sort of because there's a presumption, I think, especially in the British mindset, that the guest is always better behaved than the host in that way. So you think, well, if someone's come to the country to work, then this community is probably going to be a bit better quality than us, in this sort of humility that might have been had with the people. At the same time, the state wants to hush things up to keep things in order.
Listen, for a country that makes a distinction, very clear distinction between a Yorkshireman and a Welshman, you could not make a distinction between Pakistan and India, and you branded everybody as South Asia. Now, that's
thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up, because when we were in the middle of our conference, we actually had this conversation, and I said exactly this to Kenneth. How can your newspapers keep writing South Asia like we are just this general broad group of people with no distinction? Because quite honestly, Indians are contributors. Whichever part of the world we go to, we work really hard. We are the biggest contributors to your GDP. Honestly, biggest contributors to your, doctors and nurses and skilled people who are making your country better, because the skill goes from ours. But at the same time, when it comes to crimes, when it comes to negative things, we're all branded together and called South Asians. Absolutely not. Please call them out by their nationalities, by their names. Please do that, because Indians are not going abroad and up to these activities which are making headlines all over
See,
the world.
here's the problem. What happens is you walk into an Indian restaurant in Europe, it's largely the name is Indian.
No, but how many of them are Indian?
The chef,
They
the
could, it
the
could
chef
be
is
a
Bangladeshi
Pakistani
and the owner may
restaurant,
be a
it could be a
Pakistani.
Bangladeshi.
So
Exactly.
So they
Yes.
all
You want to call
work under
yourself
the-
Indian because
Yeah.
we're the larger group of people which have earned respect. So you're calling your restaurant Indian because Indians have earned respect in that regard. So you would be a Pakistani restaurant or a Bangladeshi restaurant, and I'm not talking about those specific restaurant owners, but call yourselves by your names.
Electorally, the left has always, well, certainly in the last 20, 25 years, as Britain has got quite a lot wealthier, and the mode of work has changed from very, very hard work that it was 50, 60 years ago, and so on. People have become a touch more decadent, I would say, than they once were, and politics has changed. And in this way, the left has considered that they could not rely on the old economic arguments of, rich versus poor or whatever else, because everyone's kind of well off, and so they need to have a block vote, which they can protect at all costs, which will guarantee them certain constituencies and so on. But ultimately, to sort of add to that precision, this also is very bad for communities from, for example, from of Pakistani origin, though, because one has to understand that even within the country of Pakistan, there are vast cultural differences, even between cities. So I always say, okay, people from Lahore are different, people from Mirpur, they've had a different experience of life, they've had different origins and so on. And in fact, if you really want to understand the situation, you have to have this local knowledge, which the British used to have a long time ago. Otherwise, they couldn't have done what they'd done. Or we couldn't have done what we'd done. In that way, but still here is the same issue, is that actually your best advocate for dealing with things like the grooming gang and so on is to be able to say, okay, in a particular community, you have a problem, call it out, but then say, okay, let's get the good guys in that community to work with us and to refine down to exactly what is the problem within that community.
One of the parts, one thing, Charu, Anku also raised this, and I want to, in her first opening remark,
Can
she said
I just first talk about terrorism, and because we're talking about Pakistan. See, I think our country has gone through every dimension of terrorism, every dimension. So not just cross-border infiltration, which has caused terror. There's been online radicalization. There have been financial networks which have actually funded so-called political protests in India. There's been ideological indoctrination. Demographic pressures in India have increased in many ways. And over the last, leave this decade, let's go back one decade, we've lost thousands and thousands of civilian lives in various attacks across the country. And we've gotten to a point where I think the world needs to come together and agree that terrorism is surviving because we are letting it survive. Pakistan has a responsibility if it calls itself sovereign. It has a responsibility because no state has the right to let its territory be used to kill civilians in another country, and that is what has been happening.
For example, my country,
Why,
Belgium,
Philip?
50% of all the political refugees from Gaza come to Belgium. Why? Because immigration is a political, ideological weapon of Islam. It's called hijrah in Arabic. Hijrah is the immigration of Muhammad from is the immigration example of Muhammad they want to follow. And it's an example for them how to conquer a city or a country who is non-Muslim. And that's what they are doing, coming to Europe and using immigration and demography as a weapon to conquer us and to organize this hostile takeover of Europe. That's what it's all about. It's a weapon. It's a weapon.
I think they understand exactly what they are doing. And I'm going to use my country as an example. Nobody is dumb. Political parties and their leaders are not dumb. There are political parties which benefit greatly from this block voting. They are going to keep nurturing this block voting because it keeps them in power. They're not concerned about what happens 10 years later. They're not concerned about preserving
10 years later, they will not
our
be in
culture
power.
for future
10
generations.
years later,
No, but
they
they're
will
not
have to
concerned.
change their name.
Exactly.
10
But they're
years later,
they're
they
not
will be
concerned about
displaced.
that. They're absolutely not concerned, because what they are concerned about is that how do I keep this bloc together and how do I keep this bloc continuing to vote for me. Now, West Bengal is a case and example where it benefits the political powers to keep them together. They are not dumb. They know what they're doing, and yet they continue to do it at the risk of their future generations, at the risk of losing their cultural identity, at the risk of losing basic safety in their society.
See, you know, it sometimes beats me. I'm just saying, I've got no disrespect to any politician, but you know, in our country, Jammu and Kashmir, 5 lakh plus Hindu families had to leave. Okay, and it didn't make a headline. In the state where we are having this discussion today, in Uttar Pradesh, in Sambhal, an entire district demographic population was changed over 20 years from 85% Hindus to 85% Muslims. They all had to leave. And then they said it's a socio-economic thing because there are no jobs, so they are being forced to flee. The entire religious aspect has been changed. And why? Very systematically. Because as per the Hindu faith, the next avatar of Vishnu is supposed to be born in that area. So they've cleansed that place of the Hindu faith. That's what they've done. Now, if you're looking at Bengal, the Chief Minister of Bengal is a patriot. I would like to believe so. And she is seeing the Prime Minister, the interim advisor of Bangladesh, present a book which says The Art of Triumph that has all of Bengal and all of the Northeast as part of a greater Bangladesh. He's presenting it to everybody.
And she's taking it.
And she has not said a single word against it.
See, that's the thing. They can do what they want. Why are you allowing it to happen to your country, to your people?
No, but that also comes to the policy of the country, right? If you want to crack down on illegal immigrants, you think that the state cannot do it?
Exactly,
it can.
yeah.
From the center, it can.
Absolutely.
It's not been done.
Yes.
We have, you know how many illegals we have in our country today? Illegals in our country. That number is more than 4.5 crore. That is more than 450 million illegals in our country. You see the problem that we have?
It's a huge problem.
But to turn back to
And they're hiding in plain sight.
To turn back to your question, why Muslim people doesn't go to other Muslim country? Because they know European politicians are weak. And if you come in France and you don't have any authorization, you don't have any visa, you can stay. And if you have the obligation to turn back in your country, for example in Algeria, the government of Algeria will refuse to take him back.
Yeah.
And he will have also the money from the state. He doesn't have to work. So he have facilities to have an accommodation, to have the meals, etc. And one promise of Macron 8 years ago, it was he said, with me, no one French homeless in the streets. And we have much more homeless people in the streets. But if you are Algerians, you come in France, you have much more than homeless citizens. So the problem is we need politicians who do also a policy of national priority.
Yeah.
To help first French citizens, and after if we have extra money, but we don't have.
Because the real values aren't given anymore to our children, and they don't see the families as a cornerstone of our society anymore. And that's why we have a weak society, and that's become because of the socialism that has been in place politically for a long time, which was necessary in the past to give people and laboring people more rights, but it went over to the wrong side, and then we got the immigrants in it, and we got the Islamo-socialism actually, which is on a weak culture, and now we are not strong enough to defend ourselves.